What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. And with the trade deadline officially done, now that it is 4:01 p.m. Eastern Time, I figured we'd go back. I'd give my grades on all the trades. So, with no further ado, let's get into grading these trades. Yeah. Let's starting with a deal made back on September 9th. The Jags traded Tank Bigsby to the Eagles for a fifth and a sixth. Um, well, this was a good move. Will Shipley got injured early on for Philadelphia, so they needed a backup, and I mean he's looked really good so far for the Eagles. Obviously Saquon Barkley's a top guy, but Bigsby's been a decent backup for Philadelphia, and I don't think they'd really care about the trade. For Jackson, I mean care about the picks for Jacksonville. I mean, yeah, Travis Etienne has been fantastic. Basilton, obviously. Um, so they didn't really need Tank Bigsby. So I mean, it was a good deal for both teams. I give Philly probably a B and Jacksonville a B plus. Moving on to the Patriots trading Jalen Polk in a seventh in 2028 for a 2027 sixth. And I mean, Jalen Polk, I'm pretty sure is out for the year, so it's not really going to matter, but decent value. New Orleans gets a seventh for a sixth. Not that big of a trade. So I'd give the Saints a B and the Patriots a B plus. Moving on, to the Jets trading for Jarvis Brownlee and a seventh 2026 for a 2026 sixth. I mean, this is decent value. Obviously, we'll talk about some big Jets trades later in the video. But this was just Tennessee moving on from a guy who, I mean, it is interesting because he is a younger guy. You'd think they want to keep, but he also wasn't drafted by um, the current GM, Mike Organzi. So getting some value for him. And I mean, the Jets, who traded a big name corner, yeah, Thomas and Stevens and maybe Brownlee, second half of the season can show some potential. So for the Jets, I'll give them a C, and I'll give the Titans a B. Moving on to the Browns trading for Cam Robinson at seven. Obviously, DeJuan Jones went down earlier in the year, so it made sense for them to get some help for the tackle. Cleveland really wasn't a big seller. Surprise! I thought they'd maybe trade the Joku or Wyatt Teller or Joe Platonio or somebody else, but they didn't really make many moves. Which I mean, they did. It was reported that they were more so going to be trying to trade for younger guys, not trade away veterans, which is very interesting. I mean, Houston Robinson was supposed to be the left tackle, but he got beat out by Ursary, and also he was also injured. But so I give Houston a A, and I give the Browns probably a B plus. Moving on to the Flacco trade. Happened back on October 7th. Very, very interesting trade. Obviously, Flacco's looked pretty good for the Bengals so far. So, I mean, I didn't really like the trade before because I didn't really think there was going to be any point in getting a different quarterback. But Flacco obviously has shown he's been really good. And the Browns obviously didn't want to keep around Flacco. Although it was interesting, they traded him to a division rival in the same state who's played much better. But so I give the Bengals probably a B. I give the Browns a B also. Moving on to the Ravens trading Odafe Owe in the seventh for Aloe Gilman in the fifth. That trade's actually worked out for both teams. Owe has been fantastic for the Chargers, who needed another guy when Khalil Mack went down. He's been fantastic. Now he is on an expiring contract, so that'll be interesting to see what the Chargers do after the year, if they want to extend him or let him walk, but he's been fantastic for LA. Um, and really helped out that defense, which is one of the best. And then for the Ravens, I mean, Gilman has actually helped out this defense, making it one of the better units in the league. Because now they can play Hamilton more closer to the line of scrimmage. You have Starks obviously back there. So it's a win-win trade. I'd probably give both teams an A plus for how well they were able to swap these two players at two different positions, and both were able to work out. Moving on to the Browns Jags trading 2021 corners. Isaac Campbell has played pretty well for Cleveland, being in a more man-based scheme. He also, was extended last offseason, so it makes sense for Cleveland to have another corner out besides Denzel Ward um long term, hopefully. Swap of a sixth and a seventh doesn't really matter. Newsom's been all right. Yeah, I don't think he's really lived up to being the first round talent. He has an expiring deal, so. But it is interesting to see the Jags trade away Tyson Campbell. Well, I know the current regime didn't draft, but he is still a really good player, and he's worked out in Cleveland. I give the Browns an A, and probably the Jags a C plus so far. Moving on to the Titans. This was made last week. Trading Roger McCreary in a sixth, which could become a fifth depending on some certain conditions. Getting a fifth back, which could become a fourth. I like this move for the Rams. LA has kind of needed secondary help. A lot of people thought they'd trade for Jalen Ramsey in the offseason, obviously didn't. You get a young guy who is on an expiring deal, but the Rams kind of need help at corner with not exactly the greatest group of guys, but they do get the best out of them. For Tennessee, it is interesting, but it's kind of the same thing with Jarvis Brownlee earlier. They were kind of just moving off from guys who weren't in the long term picture. Um, and, I mean, Tennessee didn't move off a lot of more guys that I thought they might have, but he wasn't in the long term plans. They weren't going to extend him. And I like it for LA. I'd give them probably an A, and I give the Titans a B. This was an interesting one. The Pats traded Keon White um, to the Niners end of 2027 6 for swap of six. For San Fran, it seemed like they were always looking around for edge rushers. Obviously, Nick Bosa went down earlier, and then Michael Williams went towards ACL, and both guys are out for the year, obviously. So I like San Fran going out and getting a another pass rusher to be able to get after the quarterback. They obviously wanted other guys who they didn't end up getting, but I did like San Fran going out and getting a pass rusher. I thought it was interesting for New England just because, Keon White last year, he kind of broke out, and I kind of thought in 2025 he was going to continue that. Hasn't, been the greatest so far, but it is very interesting to see the Pats move on from a guy who their current GM did draft. Well, but he was a part of the process. Like, he was a part of the team that drafted Keon White in 2023. But for San Fran, I give this a B. Needing a pass rusher with their top guys going down. In New England, I give it a C plus. Getting some value for a guy who maybe wasn't in the long term plans of this team. And then the Pats made another trade, trading Kyle Duggar in a sixth or a seventh, 4 to 6. Thought it was interesting, New England moving on from this guy, because the current regime did give him that extension last off season when he was going to be a free agent, but he kind of just fell out of favor in Mike Vrabel's defense. So it kind of felt like he was inevitably going to get traded. Um, so they at least got something for him, but I didn't think it was the best idea for Pittsburgh. I mean, they traded away Megan Fitzpatrick, opening up a hole in the safety spot. Duggar, I'm not gonna say will fill that void, but should at least help out um that defense to make it better. Maybe the way they played against the Colts is gonna be more like they will play now. They have Duggar back there, but thought it was an interesting move for New England, given that um the defense, which has a lot of young guys um on the roster, you think they want to maybe keep those guys. So I'd give Pittsburgh a B plus, and New England I'd probably give a B. But on to an interesting one. Eagles first of many trades they've made. Got Michael Carter in the seventh for John Mechie in the sixth. Thought it was interesting. Philly obviously has needed corner help. Obviously, you let go Darius Slay back in the off season, kind of relying on Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. And DeJean's more of a slot guy, so they didn't really have another outside guy. Um, so Michael Carter, and obviously this started the Jets um fire sale. So I thought it was a good move um for Philly to try to address that need of another outside corner. But I thought it was interesting they traded John Mechie, who they traded for prior to the season, like during the roster cut deadline. It felt interesting. You trade for a guy, then you trade away. But I mean, the Jets, they traded for another wide receiver, another young wide receiver. So we'll see if, they're probably just trying to get some young talent on this offense alongside Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. I'll give the Eagles a B plus and the Jets a B. Moving on to the Jair Alexander trade. I felt inevitable the Ravens either were going to trade him or cut him. He'd been a healthy scratch most of the year. He's been horrible in the two games he's played in, including the Bills game where he was just getting destroyed by Buffalo's wide receivers. So I thought it was a good move for the Ravens to get off of him. You get a sixth rounder for a guy who clearly is not really that good anymore. I thought it was interesting the Philly traded for him a couple days after getting Michael Carter. Like it felt interesting that you trade for a guy who clearly is declining as a player after you traded for a guy like Michael Carter who's younger and is a better player right now. So I give the Eagles probably a C. I give the Ravens an A, just because they didn't really like. He clearly isn't that good anymore. So the Ravens at least got some value for him, and I feel like Philly. I feel like this trade is kind of like the Kevin Byard trade a couple of years ago, where like they're trading for a guy because of the name he's gonna be seen as maybe a long term, like seen as like a huge trade um for the team, but it doesn't really work out. We'll have to another Philly trade. The Eagles traded for Jalen Phillips, gonna make him a third. Oh, this was good value for Miami. The Dolphins didn't end up trading Bradley Chubb or Jalen Waddle. I thought it was a bad idea to trade Waddle, but I thought they could have traded Chubb at least to what's the word? I thought it was interesting, like to trade off from Chubb and get some capital for him. But I thought it was a good idea to trade away Phillips, who on expiring deal clearly isn't the same player he once was, and you get something for him to at least help out this roster. And I actually see the same way with Jair Alexander and Jalen Phillips. Like they're big names, but I feel like they're not really going to really affect Philly. Like I know he played under Vic Fangio, but I just don't think after all the injuries, Phillips is really the same player he was earlier in his career. And I feel like the Eagles are just trading for two guys that after the year are just going to move on, and they weren't really seen as impact players. Moving on to the Ravens, they traded for Draymond Jones, giving up a conditional fifth, which could become a fourth. Apparently, if he gets 2 sacks and the Ravens make the playoffs, so Tennessee obviously hoping for both those things to happen, but that was a good move for both teams. I didn't give my grades. I give Miami A plus, and probably I give them Philly a C minus just because it felt like a bad trade for them, or just a C, not a C minus. Back to the Draymond Jones trade. Sorry, I thought it was a good value. Tennessee moving on from a veteran who clearly wasn't going to be a long term piece on this team. Another 2024 signing, I want to say, that just hasn't worked out. So that was a good move for the Ravens, bringing in a pass rusher when they really desperately need one. And I'd give the Ravens probably a B plus. I'd give Tennessee probably a B. And then moving on to today's trades for the deadline. Starting off with Logan Wilson, moving on from Cincinnati to Dallas. He goes from the worst defense to the second worst defense. And Cincinnati gets a seventh. I thought it was interesting what Dallas did. Like, I get their defense has been horrible, but it kind of felt like they were going all in, trading for these veteran guys. We'll talk about another guy they traded for. And it proves the defense, but I don't really see it impacting the team so much. I think if you're Cincinnati, it makes sense. Logan Wilson has gotten less and less playing time as the season's gone on. Clearly isn't a long term guy, and clearly has declined as a player. They have Demetrius Knight, who they drafted, and a couple other guys up the linebacking room. So I thought it was a good move for Cincinnati. Thought it was an interesting move. It does improve their linebacking room for Cincinnati, but I just thought it was interesting. So I give the Bengals probably a B plus, and I'd probably give Dallas a C minus. Moving on to the Jags trading for Jacoby Myers, giving up a fourth and sixth. I thought this was an interesting move, just because, like, I get they have a lot of injuries on the offensive side, but you have De'Ami Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, Brenton Strange. Like, they have the ammo on offense. I thought they could more bring in another pass rusher or another guy in the secondary. Like, I thought it was interesting that they traded for a wide receiver on an expiring deal. They might not extend, and you're just trading for them to be a part of the team this year. Like, if it feels like a move a contender would make, knowing this is like a 1 year thing. So I thought it was interesting. I thought he could have gone to New England because he knows the Josh McDaniels offense from being with McDaniels in New England and obviously signing with the Raiders and with McDaniels there. So I thought that would have made more sense. Buffalo, like Jacksonville, doesn't really seem like the perfect fit. And it was a very interesting trade for the Jags. For Vegas, I think it was a good move trading off from Jacoby. I know the wide receiver room isn't the greatest, but he clearly didn't want to be a part of the team. He clearly isn't a long term option for Vegas. So it made sense to move off from him and get something for him. You get a fourth and a sixth. You get to have Trey Tucker, Jack Best, Dante Thornton, some of the younger guys. You get them more playing time to see what they can do. So I give the Raiders a B plus. I give Jacksonville a C. Moving on to the big blockbuster, one of them, the Jets trading Sauce Gardner to the Colts for 2 firsts and Adonai Mitchell. I mean, this was a great trade by Chris Ballard. Ever since Charvarius Ward went down, the secondary has not been the greatest, at least in the corner room, outside of Kenny Moore, the best slot corner in the league. So you get Sauce, who under contract, because the Jets gave him that huge extension. Um, and this was a great trade by Indy. Like they are saying we are going to contend this year. Like I thought if they stayed put, they would have been like, maybe we're not going to be that great. But Chris Ballard, aggressive move to trade for a guy like Sauce Gardner, saying we're going to contend this year and contend for years with this great defense that they have. Great job. It is 2 first round picks, but if they're going to be competing and making the playoffs, they're going to be late first round picks. So it's like, how much are you really giving up? And then Adonai Mitchell, fresh start with the Jets. Obviously, trading for John Mechie and that swap with Michael Carter and the Eagles. You're getting these young receivers who maybe in a new environment can be a better player. Obviously, if Garrett Wilson, maybe Adonai Mitchell can become that wide receiver too and give this Jets offense another element. So for Indy, I give this probably an A because of how like they didn't have to give up that much for a guy. Like yes, they gave up 2 first round picks, but it's like they're gonna be late first round picks. And Adonai Mitchell obviously wasn't really a part of the team anymore. And you get a guy who was extended in the offseason. Sorry, was extended in the offseason. So it's like the cap hit is apparently going to go down each year, and the Jets are paying a portion of his salary this year. So it's like the Colts are a big winner, and then I give the Jets I give them an A2. You get 2 first round picks for a guy who maybe wasn't in the long term plans, even though they did extend him this past offseason, but wasn't part of the long term plans. And you get Adonai Mitchell, a young guy who maybe in a new environment on a Jets team that will most likely be picking a quarterback in the first round next year. Maybe as a wide receiver too, behind Garrett, as a more featured guy. Unlike Indy, where like they have so many guys like Warren, Downs, Pierce, Pittman. Maybe it can work out. So I give them both an A. Moving on to the Seahawks trading for Rashid Shaheed, giving them a fourth and a fifth. That's a great move for Seattle. You know, trying to win now with the team you have in a wide open NFC. Like, there's no clear cut team in really either conference. Like, there's no elite team where you're like, they're for sure going to win it. And Shaheed gives this offense another element. You have JSN. Torrey Horton's broken out as a rookie. Cooper Kupp has been injured, has been fine, but you get Shaheed, who knows the offense because Clint Kubiak was his OC last year. So obviously he's going to know the offense. Phenomenal trade for Seattle, getting a guy who, if you're able to extend him, can be that wide receiver 2 or that big play wide receiver 3 guy behind Horton and JSN for the long term future, giving Sam Darnold another weapon. And for New Orleans, they clearly weren't going to keep both him and Olave. Olave, I feel like, was more of a pipe dream for to get traded. He was more of a like he was more of the actual guy who was going to get traded. You get 2 picks, fourth and a fifth, for a guy you weren't going to extend and clearly weren't going to have as a long term piece. So I'm glad to see New Orleans move on from Shaheed. I give the Seahawks an A plus, and I give New Orleans an A. I think both teams walk out pretty good. Moving on to an interesting trade. The Bears traded for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Swap of late round picks. This was the Cleveland trade I was talking about earlier. Signed. It's a 1 year deal. Bears obviously need to improve that pass rush. Because you have Montez Sweat on one side, but he's not like a dominating edge rusher like a Myles Garrett, Micah, TJ Watt, Will Anderson. Like he's not like a guy who like can take over a game like the other guys can. So you get some help, a rotational guy who former first rounder, maybe in Chicago he can work. out, and maybe he can help this Bears defense be better. For Cleveland, I'm gonna give this an A+ for the Browns, probably a B+ for Chicago. I mean, you move on from a guy who was just a 1 year contract, so it's not like you're really losing anybody in particular, and a late round swap is really nothing. Moving on to another big trade by the Jets, they sent Quinnen Williams to Dallas for Mozzie Smith, a second in 2026, and a 2027 first. Apparently, is like whoever higher between Dallas and Green Bay, their pick goes to New York. So it's like if the Cowboys next year finish with a better record and make it farther in the playoffs than Green Bay, it'd be the Packers pick. If it's Dallas's finishes worse, they would obviously give up their pick. Um, I thought this was great value for Quinnen Williams, a guy kind of like Sauce. It was interesting that he was traded, but it seems like Darren Muji went to move on from these guys, saying, "Hey, we're a bad team. Why don't we try to move on from these, star players, get picks, and maybe a young player like they get with Mozzie Smith and obviously Adonai Mitchell, and then maybe you can build through the draft with these picks." Now they have three firsts in 2027, two firsts in 2026, two seconds in 2026. We'll see if they keep all those picks, but it really gives them a lot of picks to where, if they don't want to go QB in 2026, or if they want to trade for a guy, they can be able to give up other teams' first round picks, keep their own, or if they want to wait until 2027 when maybe Arch is more likely to come out, maybe they finish with like a better record, they trade up, giving up some of these picks that they have. So I thought this was great value for a guy in Quinnen Williams, who great player, but clearly wasn't going to be the reason the team was going to make the playoffs. For Dallas, I mean, another interesting move. Like, it just confused me what Dallas did. Like, I get their defense is bad, and they wanted to bring in guys to improve the defense, but it's like ugh, at the same time, it's like if you were going to trade for Quinnen Williams, why did you then trade Micah Parsons for Kenny Clark? Like, I know Clark's more of a nose tackle. Well, Williams is a defensive tackle. You know, more of that Aaron Donald mold. While Clark's more of a nose tackle, you put in for like rundowns. But like, it just confuses me. Like, if they like, if you're trading for Quinnen Williams, when you already have Kenny Clark and you already have also Diggy, like you're crowded at the defensive tackle position, like, and also their biggest need was in the secondary, and they could have traded for Sauce Gardner. Now, I get maybe they weren't going to give up two firsts, but it's like, but it's like it just confuses me. Like now they have three defensive tackles who all, you know, are going to need to play significantly because of how much money they're getting paid. You still need an edge rusher. You still need guys in the secondary. Like it improves the defense, but it's like they're going all in when they're probably not going to make the playoffs. And it's like these deals don't make sense for Dallas unless they were, making a playoff push, saying, "Hey, we're going to go all in, trading for these guys to beef up our defense." The defense is bad. And are Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams really going to give this defense more ability to play better? They probably will, but it's like it just doesn't really make sense what Dallas is doing. Like I figured after losing to the Cardinals, Dallas might have considered trading maybe a Kenny Clark. Hey, we're not going to be a playoff team. Obviously, Jerry's going to believe and the Cowboys are going to make the playoffs. But it's like the team clearly needs a reset, and like trading for guys, acting like you're going to make a playoff push just doesn't make sense. Like they're being a buyer when they probably should have been a seller. But hey, the Jets, I'm going to give this an A. I'm going to give them a C plus to the Cowboys. Great player, Quentin Williams. I just don't like the trade for Dallas. Um, and yeah, those were all the trades. Making sure there were no other trades. Oh, there was another trade. The Saints traded Trevor Penning to the Chargers for a 2027 sixth. Um, I mean, good move for New Orleans, for LA. Obviously, Joe Alt's now out for the year, alongside Rashawn Slater, who was out prior to the season. You get Trevor Penning, who has not really worked out as a first round pick, but maybe in LA. And he has been better the past 2 years, and after being moved to guard, maybe they put him back out at tackle, and maybe it works out, and Justin Herbert can have some relief. I mean, good move for New Orleans, moving on from a guy that clearly is not the greatest. So I give the Chargers probably I give them a B, and I give New Orleans a B plus. But yeah, those were all the trades that happened in the 2025 season. Hope you guys like the video. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let me know what you guys thought of the trade deadline. And I will catch you guys tomorrow for my mid-season predictions. But until then, bye.